possible. Oh,
Yeah.
hang on.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so we are ready to go.
Thank you. Welcome everybody to the Northern Middlesex NPO meeting for September 24th, 2025. Agenda item 1 is Kelly, can you call the roll?
Sure. Brian Fallon,
Brian Fallon representing Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, Secretary and CEO of Mass DOT.
Pat Wojcik,
Here.
Stephen Themelis,
Yeah.
Wayne Janess,
Here.
and I believe we do not have Tom Beaumille or Karen Pulio, but we do have quorum.
And you do have Timothy Paris representing the
sorry.
Highway Administrator, Jonas Bengoa.
Sorry, Timothy, thank you. I'm marking you down here. Thank you. All right.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 2 is open forum for the public comment. Do we have any comments from the public or others? Seeing and hearing none, I think we can move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the August 27th, 2025 meeting minutes.
And just to note, Karen Pulio has just joined us as well.
Okay, great. Can I ask for a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from August 27th?
Motion to
approval,
approve.
Wayne Janess.
I'll second Wayne's.
Thank you.
Okay. Ready for the roll?
Yes.
All right. Tim Paris,
Yes.
Pat Wojcik,
Yeah.
Brian Fallon,
Yes.
Stephen Themelis,
Yes.
Wayne Janess,
Yes.
Karen Pulio.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 4 is FY 2025 UPWP Administrative Adjustment. And I believe, Kelly, you're going to present on this?
Yes, this is just a very brief, presentation. So we are in the final month of our federal fiscal year, and we are requesting an administrative. Oh, sorry. There were 2 agendas in the folder. You might have printed out the wrong one. Sorry. That's all right. We're requesting a minor, so this would be an administrative adjustment to basically reallocate some of our direct funding. We have some overages in some areas and some areas where we have some remaining funds, and this would just allow us to do a minor rebalance of our direct expenses. None of these things actually move money out of our direct expense, so it's just basically like an accounting reallocation. So moving additional money into training and development to account for an additional attendance at a conference, or several conferences and events, including the upcoming MassDOT conference, and then moving a little bit of money into I believe our transportation equity program. That was for our website redesign. So this was to actually have our consultant re-import some old minutes and agendas, so we didn't have to spend staff time in doing that. And then there were areas in advertising and translation where we had a significant amount of money left over. So this would basically take that money and put it into areas where it's needed. None of these things actually meet the need for an actual amendment with a public notice. So this is just a minor accounting change. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has questions. But otherwise, our request is a vote to endorse from the MPO.
Great. Is there any questions for Kelly? Hearing none. Can I get a motion and a second to vote on this endorsement?
We'll make a
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Kelly, can you call the roll?
Yes, Karen Pulio,
In favor.
Tim Paris,
Yes.
Pat Wojcik,
Yes.
Brian Fallon,
Yes.
Stephen Themelis,
Yes.
Wayne Janess.
Yes.
Great, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 5 is an update on the process for new MPO members. And I believe Kelly, you're going to present on that.
Yes, so a brief update. We've been updating you over the last couple of months. Just to note, we did have an appointment letter from the LRTA. So from the LRTA Advisory Board, Tom Bomo was reappointed with Bob Rafferty as his designee. So starting in October, Bob will probably be joining us for our monthly MPO meetings. And then Karen, we are glad to have you back as a member of the MPO. So thank you for that. From the NMCOG Council, we have Stephen Themelis, who's the NMCOG Council Chair, and Pat Wojcik, who's our NMMPO representative. So great to have you staying with us. We put out a call for ex officio members and we received several responses. We are putting forward Jason Silva, who is the Dunstable Town Administrator, to join us as an ex officio member representing our smaller NMCOG communities. He's from the town of Dunstable. And then Jeff Rosen, who is an active cyclist and pedestrian across the region. He also lives in Dunstable, but he's very interested in active transportation and mobility. He applied to serve in the role of representing the interests of those who walk, bike, or roll. We did not get any expressions of interest from anyone representing an environmental justice community. So that position remains vacant, although we are going to continue to promote that and keep that open. And if somebody does express interest in the coming months, then we'll invite that person to join us at our upcoming MPO meetings. But all of these positions will become active as of September 30. And so starting in our October meeting, we'll see a few new faces.
Great. Thank you. Is there any questions for this item? Great. Hearing none, I will move on to agenda item number 6, Northern Middlesex MPO project updates. And I believe some staff members are going to present on this.
Yes, just to kind of open this up and introduce it, all of our staff members here on our transportation team have been working on a lot of projects, constantly balancing a lot of projects. With the close of this federal fiscal year, we wanted to report out on 4 projects that were funded under the Unified Planning Work Program to give you an update on their status. Some of these projects have final reports that we're closing out. And so once we get approval from the LRTA and the jobs accessibility analysis and on Drake on the prioritization study, we will share those with you so you have the opportunity to review them. But I wanted staff to have the chance to present those today. So we're going to start with the Drake prioritization study. So do you want to sit in this chair? So I'm going to hand this over to Apple. And when you are ready, you can take it away.
Hello. So as a brief refresher, this transportation prioritization study was an amendment of the Bridge Street Corridor study initially proposed by Drake for our FY25 UPWP. And this was to kind of get support from NMCOG to support Drake transportation planning efforts with an overall goal to prioritize Drake's projects to guide immediate and long-term or near-term activities that would advance multimodal transportation planning goals as outlined by the master plan. So I began by conducting an existing conditions review of Drake, getting familiar with where the infrastructure is, so roads, sidewalks, bike lanes, etc., determining points of interest in the town, and then using the NMCOG tip or NMMPO tip transportation evaluation criteria scoring rubric to score projects proposed in different plans that have been set out by Drake. So documents that informed this analysis were the master plan to get a sense of the kinds of policies the town wants to pursue, the complete streets policy, which outlined a variety of different projects within the town to pursue, and then a Drake Transportation Planning Guide, which was a NMCOG project 23 to 24 that determined other areas of interest that weren't necessarily in the master plan or on the complete streets policy. I do want to note there are 2 existing projects currently happening in and around Dracut. There's the MassDOT Route 110 project, which goes, I don't know if you can see, but on the southern edge, southeastern edge of that image is Route 110, and that is a complete repaving of 110 from Lowell to Methuen, which will include pedestrian crossings, bike lanes, and traffic calming measures. In addition to the Lakeview Avenue School Complex, also known as the Safe Routes to School improvements at Inglesby Elementary. So once the existing conditions of Dracut were established, so where do people live? Where do people want to go? The answer is kind of all across town. I then took the transportation evaluation criteria that Blake Acton had revised for our 2026 to 2030 tip, and then simplified it even further. So this is a guide for the town of Dracut to give them an idea of what projects could be tip eligible versus what projects they may want to pursue locally or through different grant funding. So instead of going, mobility, bike, walk, car, etc., I just went mobility overall. Does this improve how people get from point A to point B? For example, or safety, not necessarily looking at pedestrian safety or cyclist safety, but what boxes does it check? Does it improve cyclist safety? Not by what degree, but just does it yes or no? And so on and so forth. Additionally, the transportation equity bonus score was considered. So that is, again, whether a community is, or a project is within an environmental justice community, within a quarter mile, or not within a quarter mile. And then projects receive either an additional bonus score of 1 for within a quarter mile, 2 for inside, and 0 for not within a quarter mile. Additional bonus points were also given on how many other plans this project appeared on. So if it seemed to be a higher priority for the town based on how many times it was mentioned. And then once all of that data was collected across 28 projects, these were then weighted the same as a tip category. So you wouldn't get a score of, for example, 40, you would end up with a weighted score that reflected our tech tip scoring process. These projects were scored based off of the detail provided in the Complete Streets program, which involves different annotations for pedestrian versus cyclist safety, things like that. The master plan additionally outlined some project goals or things they would like to see, so I counted that as part of the design, quote unquote. And then the transportation or the project guide that was previously done by NMCOG had similar project descriptions. So this is not the end all be all of whether a project would make it on the tip, but just kind of a starting point to get the ball rolling. The top 5 scoring projects were improvements at Pleasant Street and Lakeview Avenue. So this is Route 113, and then one of the major business and housing corridors in Dracut, and that scored, usually we would have a maximum score of 18, but with all the bonus points, 19.4, 19.5. Pleasant Street and Route 113 sidewalk improvements. So generally different sections that were highlighted in these project guides along Route 113, sidewalk installation, pedestrian crossings. Roadway improvements on Mammoth Road from Lakeview Avenue up to the New Hampshire State Line, which was marked as a separate project from Mammoth Road down to Lowell. But this was seen as like a higher priority due to the access to schools, access to healthcare facilities, and so forth. General Mammoth Road sidewalks, which would be then Lakeview down to Lowell. And finally, some Lakeview Avenue at Collinsville streetscape improvements, so kind of like the middle chunk of Lakeview Avenue. And then it is worth noting that that final Lakeview project did have the same score as an additional project, but due to kind of costs and the flexibility that a lower cost project would give NMCOG and the NMPO to program that project, I would recommend this one over the other. And then finally, after all of that, The next step is kind of just general project planning and programming. So the town of Dracut, NMCOG staff, and then members of District 4, we would meet and then start to discuss these projects, kind of how to get them under design, how to get them under TIP, the TIP umbrella and so forth. And again, worth noting that there were 28 projects. There's a lot of places that Dracut wants to do work. If a project didn't necessarily score well on the TIP, that does not mean that it is not worth pursuing. It may just be more worthwhile to use Chapter 90 funds or apply for a Complete Streets grant or Mass Housing, Mass Works, anything like that. Smaller, locally centered grants. And that's all for me.
Any questions on this?
I have a
I
question.
just have a question.
Oh, I have-
Apple,
Matt has a question.
so you said. Oh,
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, hi, Apple.
Hi.
Just a question on the Dracut Transportation Prioritization Study. You said it was UPO funded. Was that a request from the town administration for this project, or how did it derive?
Yes, it was town requested. So originally the town requested a study of the Bridge Street corridor, which is Route 38. And then decided they wanted more input on what projects to do studies for and what projects to begin designing, things like that.
Yeah, it's really thorough and it's a great approach. I'm just thinking about the other communities in our district. So you said there it was funded. How much money was it for the actual study? Do you know?
We allocated about 16,000 for the study. That 16,000.
15,000?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, in our UPWP.
Yeah, I mean, is this gonna be, so you're waiting for requests from the different towns? It's just not something part of the NIMCOG process to look at all the communities in a sense and try to get them an evaluation where they're at and where they're going in terms of this type of transportation prioritization study? You know, I'm just thinking about Pepperell and smaller communities.
Yeah, I think this is something where, we've already programmed our 2026 UPWP, but if we had a community that was interested in this, we could definitely look at it for 2027. So that would be starting next October.
Okay,
Yeah.
so next October. So in terms of requests for something like this, how much lead time?
So we typically go to the town managers and city manager, town administrators in the spring to talk about our next UPWP.
Okay.
So I would think like March or so would be a time when somebody might want to put their name in a hat for these projects. And then we bring these to the MPO usually about in May as a list of
Mhm.
potential projects. So, yeah.
Oh, okay, great job, Apple. Yeah, thank you.
Pat.
Okay, so my question has to do with the scores that you have on these. I mean, those are quite high
Yeah.
scores, I would
Yes.
say. I mean, if we were to put those on the tip, they were all, close
Yeah, that
at
would be
the top.
crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, if they would go on a tip, would the scores be adjusted?
Yes.
Okay.
So then this is just kind of like a plan of, we have these projects, we have some information about them, assuming the absolute best of these projects, what would that look like on a simplified version of the actual scoring rubric that we use? So I didn't feel like it was necessary to go through each project with minimal information and score 4 to 5 subcategories for each major category. So I kind of simplified it, said, this should be your priority. Let's take these top 5, if you so choose, apply, then like start the work on them, and then take that work and apply the tip tech to it. And that would likely change the scores, especially because the only bonus score on the tip is that transportation equity score. And here I've added, how many times does it come up in a plan? Is it in a master plan? Bonus point for that. Is it in complete streets? Bonus point for that. So the more the kind of the Dracut special is, the more a project gets mentioned, the more bonus points it can get and the higher it ends up on a list as part of the scoring process.
And I think like lacking actual design, you know, when we score projects for with the tech, we're looking at, you know, conceptual or construction plans. So we're able to look at more details, and none of these projects are at that state. So we had to use these other categories as a proxy for
Yes.
scoring. So these aren't necessarily indicative of how they would score using the actual tech.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's,
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, if we see these, I mean, it looks like all the, you know, we started.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Chip stuff, everything would go to Drake it over the next.
Yeah. The key question from Drake is help us prioritize this giant list of projects. And if we were going to invest money in design on anything,
What should we
because
do
we
it
want to
in?
get
Yeah.
it on the tip, what would the
Yeah.
most tip eligible project be? And this is how we developed or Apple actually developed a rubric for evaluating. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, for
great
example,
approach.
I know
Definitely.
the Pleasant Street and Lakeview Ave project has 3 bonus points right off the top. So looking at it without the bonus points, it's really 16.5 points. And that's assuming, you know, it fully incorporates bike lanes and pedestrian access and transit opportunities as it says it will.
Mhm.
But that's, you know, without plans. This is more like a what spaghetti should we throw at what wall? This is some good looking spaghetti. Let's
Sure.
go do
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I just would want to, you know, caution Drake it or, you know, any other community that just because these schools look so high,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean they're gonna be the same. on the
Yes.
rest of
And the report definitely emphasizes like, this is a recommendation. It will not look like this, and this is why. Great question.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, cool. Thank you.
I will turn it over to Blake.
Yeah, all right. So now, Blake gave a sort of a mid-process update on the LRTA jobs accessibility analysis a few months ago. But now he's nearing the end of the study, and so wanted to summarize it before we closed out 2025.
All right. Well, thanks for the introduction, Kelly. It was actually back in February when I introduced this. So I'm quite ready to be finished with this project. It's been a lot of work. So anyway, so the purpose of this project was like the real meat of this project was to conduct like an analysis where I did simulations of how many workers could access their jobs within a reasonable time frame between their home location and work location using origin destination data from the US Census. It's the same data that you see in like the longitudinal household dynamics data. But also just to wrap that up into sort of a larger analysis of like, how is LRTA doing as far as service levels, ridership, productivity, and how can we combine that with the results of what I did to come up with some hopefully useful recommendations of how to target service improvements in the future so that they can have the greatest impact for the least amount of cost. And so that little graphic on the right is sort of a reminder of sort of what this analysis was doing, where we're looking at like how much of the area can be covered within a certain amount of time, how many areas can be accessed within like, let's say 45 minutes from an origin. And the simulation actually uses the real transit schedule data that is available online to route simulated workers from where they live to where they work to see how long it takes to get there, if they could get there. So to sort of go back to the beginning of the methods here of what is like a peer agency, because I wanted to, whenever you do an analysis like this, it's good to pick other agencies that have some things in common to see what you can learn by comparing them. And it's also helpful to have a benchmark to compare them to, since the results are always relative. The numbers don't mean a whole lot by themselves, so you want to put them in context. And so I ended up picking 3 peer agencies that had similar ridership and characteristics as sort of a satellite cities of the Boston region that are considered gateway cities that have sort of a post-industrial old urban core, and that being the Brockton Area Transit, or BAT, and Merrimack Valley, or MEVA, and Worcester Regional Transit, or WRTA. So here's the 4 agencies on a map to kind of give an idea of the different geographies that we're looking at. Okay, so starting out with service levels. So this is data that's just pulled straight from the, here, I want to move something. Can I move this?
You can move it down to there you go. That's
Here, oh, there's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just using national transit data, NTD data, that's publicly available. And so what this is are the total number of vehicle revenue hours. And we're looking at average monthly vehicle revenue hours. So to give you an example, in 2024, if you put a stopwatch inside of every single bus and you turned on that stopwatch whenever the bus was in service, and you did that for an entire month and added up all the hours, that's how many hours of total operation on average that you see in 2024. And this 2025 data is only half of the year. So that data may end up changing as you have seasonal effects. But I wanted to include the most up-to-date data that was available at the time. And so my goal here is not to make LRTA look bad, but just to set the context of sort of the situation that we're looking at and let the data speak for itself. And so between all of our peer agencies, LRTA is the only agency out of the 4 whose service levels are lower in 2025 than in 2019, with an 11.7% less service hours in that time frame, with Brockton Transit sort of as the outlier with the most increase of revenue service hours versus 2019. But the other 3, all 3 have some degree of increase within that time frame. And so it's directly related to what we're seeing in this next chart, which is average monthly ridership by each of the 4 RTAs. It's absolutely worth mentioning that the change in ridership from 2019 to now for LRTA looks very similar to the change in service levels. We're seeing about 11% decline in vehicle revenue hours and about 11% decline in ridership. That is not a coincidence. More service means more ridership typically. But then you can see with some of the other agencies that there's been very significant jumps. One of the biggest factors that is driving the other RTAs jumping this much is not only have they increased service, but also they have gone fare free much sooner than LRTA has, with Brockton being sort of in the middle of the 2. So Worcester has had like 5 years of fare-free transit to recover very quickly. MEVA has had about 4 years, and Brockton has had about 2. And so there's a trend where if a transit goes or if an agency goes fare-free, about 18 months later, they seem to recover their pre-pandemic ridership. And so we can be hopeful, looking at LRTA, that they went fare-free about 9 months ago. And so maybe, hopefully next year, we'll see that recovery pattern applied to them as well. So this is, now we're getting in a little bit more complicated here, but we're looking at both revenue hours and passengers to basically look at productivity. So in an average hour, how many passengers are being served by the average bus? And so this is a way to control for additional service hours, because you could argue that, well, ridership went up because service hours went up. And there is definitely truth to that. But also, if you look at agencies like WRTA and MEVA, not only are they running more buses, but each bus is now carrying more passengers than before. They're more productive as well. And that indicates that those agencies have made whichever adjustments are necessary to induce demand for additional ridership and very likely bring in new riders who were not riders before, as it's not just the same people who are just riding more. We're now seeing a lot more riders per bus. So there's additional service and there's more riders on those buses. And it's also worth mentioning that as Brockton is sort of in the middle on some of these things, they went fare free about a year prior to LRTA, and their productivity increases maybe are perhaps not realized just yet. So perhaps in the future, we'll see some of these numbers continue to increase for LRTA and for BAT. Okay, so these are the results of the jobs access simulations. So we're moving away from looking at publicly available National Transit Database data, and now we're looking at the results of the enormous amount of simulations that I've been doing for the past couple of months. And so what these percentages represent, if we want to pick, let's say this 9.1% for WRTA in 2025, what that means is that if you take all of the jobs where workers both live and work within the service area of WRTA, and you ask how or what percent of them can get to work using WRTA in 45 minutes or less. And for that specific year, that would be 9.1% of workers can access their workplace from their home place within that time budget. And by doing these simulations over time, you can get an idea of sort of how the alignment between the service, the transit service, and where people live and work. And what you're also getting out of this is because these travels, these trips are simulated, it includes things like transfers and frequency, because the simulations account for a certain amount of randomness in when people leave to go to their work, with an emphasis on peak times. And so this is likely representative of how real world interactions are between people that live and work in the region and reality. And so the numbers are, going to be on the low side because lots of people can't use transit to get to work, even if they had unlimited time available. It's simply not possible to do that. And so what's important here is to look at how these percentages change over time and to sort of see how these RTAs sort of compare to themselves and whether or not they're increasing or decreasing. And so the results show that MIVA is really they get the gold star or the, gold medal for having the biggest amount of improvement in accessibility. And if you look at the data a little bit more, what this is showing is that there's a lot of people who were slightly above that 45-minute threshold who have since been moved underneath that 45-minute threshold. It's very sensitive. This analysis is very sensitive to these small changes. And the reason why we're looking at 45 minutes is because that's the average trip time for people who use transit to get to work in Massachusetts. And it's a good benchmark to use of what someone would reasonably expect to, how much time they would expect to spend on a commute. And that helps you look at sort of the service quality and the speed. So looking at LRTA's numbers over time, unfortunately, LRTA is the only agency that has had a decline in alignment over time. But it is hopeful if you look at when LRTA changed their combined routes to individual routes in 2024, that seemingly small change was actually a pretty significant improvement, with almost like a 30% improvement in alignment between those two time periods. And so changes like that will have network effects and allow more people to access their jobs more quickly and improve transfers. And so this next slide is looking at sort of the potential for higher ridership by looking at the differences between workers who, like we just were looking at with 45 minutes or less, but making a ratio between that and the workers who are sitting in that 45 to 75 minute range. These are workers who would need to spend over an hour potentially to get to their workplace, and to look at how those ratios have changed over time. And in this case, the lower the ratio, the better. And as you see the lines go down, essentially those are more workers who can get to work faster than before. So it's kind of a measure of commute times. And the numbers are similar to sort of our previous discussion, where LRTA has seen an increase, but you really do see a pretty dramatic improvement, again, with the improvements in service that LRTA implemented in 2024. And the gap is not nearly as wide as some of the other charts show. And so if LRTA continued to make service improvements in that vein, then they would close the gap likely quite considerably. And so here's where we get into sort of like the recommendations of if we wanted to target service improvements, where would you get the most number of workers? And so what we're looking at here is like how many workers are sitting in that 45-minute to 75-minute bin for these specific LRTA routes? And if we moved those to the under 45-minute bin, which routes, if we wanted to look at them individually, would have the greatest number of workers who can get to work right now with that transit route? The simulation shows that they live and work along that route, or they could use it to get to work in some way, but the amount of time it takes is just quite a bit. And so the simulation is very sensitive to frequency, since the simulated travelers, they spend a lot of time waiting around for the bus and waiting around for a transfer. And so what the data shows is that Route 7, which is the highest ridership LRTA route, would have the greatest potential for still increased amounts of job accessibility that is likely due to Route 7's proximity to the University of UMass Lowell and to the hospital, Lowell General Hospital, and possibly the Market Basket as well. And also the other bus routes that could benefit are routes 14, 15, and 10 in order of greatest to least. And so to kind of turn these into recommendations, we would recommend that Route 7 potentially be increased in frequency to perhaps every 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes. And possibly if you wanted to pick a suburban route to increase in frequency, Route 14 would make the most sense according to the data and would allow the greatest number of additional workers to be able to access work much more quickly. And that is also a route that only has a frequency of about once an hour. And so whenever you have a hub and spoke kind of transit model where most people need to transfer to travel from one side of town to the other, that increase in frequency can have many more network improvement effects because it allows riders to transfer from one route to another without needing to wait potentially up to an hour for the next bus. So last slide, conclusions here. So according to the data that we've seen so far, LRTA is sort of behind on service levels, ridership, productivity, and commute times, with some hopeful increases that we've saw in 2024, hopefully more to come. And sort of our recommendations is to consider increasing frequency along some of our highest ridership routes that also show the greatest potential improvement in jobs access, which Route 7 and 15 are sort of the big standouts. And then possibly, as the models have sort of shown, that NEVA and Worcester, RTA, and Brockton have all been sort of tweaking their routes to try to make them more quick and more direct connections between home and destination locations. So maybe LRTA should consider doing something like that along some of these routes that have the most number of jobs. And then also to maybe prioritize, whenever you have a lower frequency system, you have to kind of pick which routes align with which routes over others. So possibly taking some of these routes that have the greatest number of potential and prioritizing those routes for transfers so that, it's easier to transfer, let's say, between the 7 and the 15 because those routes both seem to have the highest amount of ridership and accessibility to jobs. So that's the jobs analysis for LRTA. Appreciate any questions, comments. Thank you.
I have one, Blake, Steve Demelis, how you doing?
Hi.
On the, I'm just curious, I can see why you want to move on. So much information. You did a lot of work here, obvious.
Pretty dense.
Just wondered, do the regional transit authorities, do they communicate between each other? Like, do they share data? Do they have workshops for helping improve ridership? Is there anything in place for that?
That might be, I know Justin's on the call.
Yeah, Steve. We do coordinate with other RTAs with pretty much everything we do.
Okay.
One of the big things that's happening right now is really a push for connectivity improvements. So we're already connecting with MIVA and the MBTA, but we're constantly looking at how to improve those connections. This study is really well done, Blake. I appreciate you presenting this. This looks good, and one of the things we are doing is a full service analysis of each one of our routes, and that's ongoing right now. And I'm actually going to discuss this with Blake a little more and talk about how we can coordinate this study with what we're doing.
That's great. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
Yep. I think we have more questions. Andrew Jennings?
Thank you. One of the things we've learned post-COVID is that trip purposes have changed significantly, and generally commute work trips have declined. Can the type of analysis that you've used here be used for other trip purposes, or do you think that because jobs are heavy at places like schools, that jobs is a pretty good surrogate for overall demand?
So the short answer to your question is yes, it can be repurposed. The simulations are geography based. They just have coordinates associated with them. And so if you had a different origin destination data that has data about where people travel on a regular basis, you could see, well, can they get to their destinations? I use the jobs data because it's publicly available and easy to access, and we have historical data with that. But we could easily apply this with like replica origin destination data that MassDOT allows us to have access to. And that's more general purpose travel. So that's, anonymized GPS travel that gives you an idea of how many people are traveling between this area and this area, regardless of its purpose. There is data in there, metadata about what the purpose of that travel is. The more fine-tuned you ask the questions, the more you kind of are skeptical about how true it is. But those weights of travel are still going to be really useful to look at and would provide some interesting results that would be more than just commutes. That could be sort of a part 2 of this study that would be considerably easier to do since the simulations are already done. It would just be changing out the origins destinations data and then seeing if there's anything interesting in those results that look different than what we already see. And then we have another question from Wayne.
Yes. First, thanks for this, Blake. This is awesome. This was really cool to see the outcome of all your hard work. So very impressive. I would like to ask if this is something you might be comfortable presenting to the Transportation Subcommittee of the City Council. I think that there's some benefits here for my colleagues to hear about this and learn about this and see if there's ways that we as a council can kind of foster this this growth and development of the LRTA and trying to shoot for improvements here that would be good for the city and everyone. And the other thing I was thinking of just when we were looking through this was what Andrew talked about other purposes for the trips, but also other methods of taking these trips. I'm specifically thinking of the UMass Lowell bus system and how some of these trips can be modeled with a student going to class, for example. That probably wouldn't show up in your data, but I think there might be some economies of scale here if we could get LRTA and UML's bus systems to really kind of unify and try to row in the same direction. I think there might be some benefits here, and I'm not sure how we can include that kind of analysis in this discussion, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think, Wayne, just to kind of respond to your question, I think we, definitely after Justin and Blake have a chance to talk through these results, maybe this is something that we could talk as a 3 different parties about having both the NMCOG and the LRTA come to talk to the subcommittee. We just want to make sure that we're aligned with the LRTA on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be great. I definitely would want Justin or whomever from LRTA to join in this
Hey,
kind of
of
discussion.
course, we would be glad to come and speak on that too. I'd like to be with Blake, obviously beforehand. One of the things that you may not be aware of, but we have just changed one of our routes to specifically serve the UMass Lowell campus. We took over their Orange Line service in the mornings during weekdays. So now they have access from their campus to the Gallagher terminal, which they didn't really have before. And
Yeah,
that started
was-
in August. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things in my head that made me ask.
And
the
we
question.
meet with UMass Lowell staff on a monthly basis to talk about possible changes.
Awesome.
Yep.
And I guess it's worth mentioning that Middlesex Community College does run a bus between their two
Yep.
Campuses as well,
Yep.
for whatever marginal gain that's worth in the discussion. But things to include.
All right. Well, thank
Yeah,
you
I
so
would
much for the
think-
compliments, Wayne. And I really appreciate your invitation to present this in front of the committee.
Awesome, that'd be great. We'll figure it out, and you know how to get in touch with me. So
Sure do.
Yeah, Wayne, Steve, just a comment on what you said. That's an important aspect. If you think about Lowell wants to truly become a front runner city, they got to figure this part of it out. Very important.
exactly, and there's plenty of stuff coming down the pike too that's only going to increase the demands on our transportation network. So things like link and development in Hamilton Canal District, et cetera, are only gonna increase this stuff. So important to be in front of
very
it and
important.
stay on top of it. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
We'll go ahead and conclude that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
All right. And then we have Emmanuel. Do you want me to run the slides or do you want to come over here? Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, we do. So Emmanuel has been working on a team of like an interdisciplinary team looking at the Chelmsford Center Village, and then he's also the project manager for the regional bike ped plan. So he's going to report out on both of those projects. So we'll go to this.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. As part of Chelmsford Village Center Village Streetscape Planning Project, NMCAG is conducting a comprehensive study of land use as well as transportation conditions of Chelmsford Center Village. And as part of that project, we also conducted a parking count on Thursday, August 7, on 3 different time periods at 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 5 p.m. to see the parking demand and utilization rate on different times of the day. We choose Thursday because it is the busiest day. Field observation as well as replica data shows us that peak activity is around 5 p.m. in that time, making it a representative stress states for parking demand in terms of center area. Looking at the key findings and what the result means, we see that, as you can see in the map, we conducted a parking utilization study from the center square all the way to the Summer Street, and to the north all the way to the I-4 95 ramp. And looking at the average utilization at 11 o'clock, the parking utilization is only 37%, and at 2 p.m. The average utilization rate is 34%, and at 5 p.m. it reduces to only 28%. Looking at the average utilization for a typical Thursday, it is around 33% only. That means that only 4 out of the 10 spaces are occupied, and for every available 10 spaces in Chelmsford Center Village area, only 4 of them are occupied, and there are more than 6 spaces available. Looking at the pattern, you can see on the graph that we also studied the average utilization for different land uses. You see that on-street parkings are the most constrained ones with 54%. The off-street commercial parking lots are around 34%, and the public lots that included public lots that are town-owned as well as government and DCR-owned are only 38% utilized on Thursdays. And that shows us that there is more than 60% of underutilized parking lot available, surplus parking lots. looking at the on-street parking lot as well as off-street parking lots and making a comparison, we see that the crowded on-street spaces make the system look full, even though the nearby off-street lots are on average only 34% occupied. That means 2/3 of the parking lots are open, but this gives like a wrong perception that there is only limited parking areas, but off-street parkings are more than 60% underutilized. This means that the parking issue at Chelmsford Center Village is only a supply issue, but it's not a distribution issue. And in order to manage this curb right turnover and also adding wayfinding and signage to underutilized public lots will be a very good solution.
Sorry, could you minimize this?
Oh. Ready to go? That's good. Yeah.
I love that.
Okay, looking at the next steps and the planned public engagement for the fall as part of the Chelmsford Center Village Streetscape Planning Project. There are around 6 pop-up events planned to talk to the residents, and project team is now working on scheduling these pop-up events to talk to project operators as well as residents in the area. And there is also a public forum scheduled on October 6th that will use participatory interactive mapping exercises, corridor design gallery, and streetscape design games to gather input from residents as an input for the Chelmsford Center Village project. Project team is also now developing a transportation survey to identify problems, priorities, and improvements in Chelmsford Center Village area. For the next fiscal year, the project will continue with a different funding source using district local technical assistance or DLT funding sources. Thank you. If you have any question.
I think just one thing to add to this. So this is a project that the town of Chelmsford asked us to do. They've been a little stalled in their portion of a project that's on the tip for Route 110. And so they've asked us to take a look at, do they want to continue with this project on the tip, or do they want to try to pursue other sources? Because they either have to meet MassDOT criteria in order for it to stay on the tip, or do they eliminate a bike lane and then have to find other potential sources to fund the construction? And so we're trying to help them by engaging with the community and the business owners to really understand what are the key constraints really around perceptions of parking, but also like what kind of on-street amenities do people want to see, like street trees or sidewalks or bike lanes or lighting and all of these things. So that's really the larger purpose of the study. But the parking, Emmanuel designed the parking study, and that's been really incremental to understanding what's perception and what's reality.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I would just like to comment, I'm so glad to see that parking study, because whenever people want more parking in the center, I say there's plenty of parking. There's only 2 days a year when more parking is necessary. So that confirms my,
4th of July and
Winterfest.
Yeah.
Hey, Kelly?
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve. Just off the cuff, so it's a parking study, and I guess with all this information they gathered, it's not a supply shortage, but a distribution issue. That's what the conclusion is. So they're looking at trying to find a reason why that's so. Is that my understanding? And how can that be corrected?
So part of it might be even looking at zoning. So the parking requirements for certain uses might be too high. So that might be more of a policy recommendation. I think the larger thing is when we look at the right of way and what would need to be designed in order to make this a MassDOT like a project that complies with MassDOT's project design requirements, there would need to be some changes to the way that people park on street, particularly for some of these businesses, because there's a lot of head-in parking that really is pretty dangerous. But there is a reluctance to remove parking from in front of businesses, and businesses are really going to get upset about this. So what we wanted to do was really get a sense of the facts on the ground. like if that parking is removed or changed to parallel parking, would those businesses suffer? And how much would they have adequate parking to really serve their clients, and or are there opportunities for more shared parking? Because right now, when you look at how parking is distributed in the center, there's a lot of signage about you can only park here if you're this person or that person. And, you know, I think there's maybe more negotiations that need to happen about how can we, there's more than enough parking for everybody if we actually share it. So it's largely political. But I think having the facts on the ground about how much parking is actually used versus available is important to really start that conversation. So that's where we are right now.
Okay. Yeah, that was a great explanation. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I also like to add that this is a preliminary analysis, and after the public engagement, we will do a more deeper level analysis, including the T projects that are planned in the area and what will be the implication of the parking count will be on them.
Yeah.
So we will come with the deeper level analysis as well.
Any other questions on this one? I think we can move on to the bike path plan.
Okay, I will also give a highlight on the Greater Lowell Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. And as part of the Greater Lowell Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, NMCA conducted more than 15 engagement pop-up events in more than 7+ communities, including the Regional Tourism Conference, and conducted also municipal meetings and public workshops throughout the summer. These meetings are on high visibility venues, market festivals, and also concerts, road races, range from 300 to 2,000 attendees. And NMCA didn't just only goes to festivals and concerts, but also goes to the farmers market where people go to gather input from residents. There was also a special initiative. NMCA collaborated with a team of volunteers from DIY Lowell and collaborated on scheduling a pedestrian walk audit around Galgar Terminal in Lowell. And we gathered data using survey 123, and participants reported obstructions they see on sidewalks, and that data also used as an input for the existing condition analysis. Looking at the result of the public engagement is we gather more than 724 points on the map. This is from the comments we received from the public, as well as the participatory mapping exercises during the pop-up events. We also received more than 445 plus survey responses from across the region. And we spent more than 46 hours of direct public engagement talking to residents. And looking at the key terms from the regional survey, we found out that 80% of the respondents at least walk on a weekly basis, but that is only for recreation purposes, and only 6% identify walking as their primary mode. Looking at biking, only 36% bike weekly, and only 3% use biking as a primary mode, and 62% responded that they never or rarely ride. We also identified infrastructure priorities, and from the survey, we see that sidewalk repair or installation, trail improvement or connections, safer intersection, and traffic calming measures are the top priorities respondents choose they want to see improvements on. This also aligns consistently with what we found from the pop-up events and municipal meetings as well. Regarding safety, respondents feel safer walking than biking, and top barriers to biking are inadequate infrastructure and driver behavior. The key takeaway here would be that there is high recreational participation, but a very low everyday modal share. And the safety concerns and missing connections are the primary constraints that are limiting biking and utilitarian walking. Looking at the project roadmap and milestones, we are now at the existing conditions review stage. And we successfully completed the stakeholder and community engagement that was planned for the summer. And we are now planning engagement activities that are planned for the fall. And for the October, we will have a public workshop after network identification. We will also have a Force Advisory Committee meeting to discuss on the network that is already identified. And after that, for the next fiscal year, we will have implementation strategy. And also, we will have the final plan and deliverables as well as conceptual design around March 2026. And thank you if you have any questions on the bike ped plan.
I just want to point out, because can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
Those survey responses, that is a lot of survey responses. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
And the gap between the people that say that they bike weekly, 36%,
Yeah.
versus only 3% using biking as a primary mode, that's like your potential.
Yeah.
You know, that's a lot of people that could potentially use biking as a primary mode.
Yeah.
If they could, if it was safe, if the connections existed. And so that gap is a huge opportunity. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I think the other thing that, Tool pointed out when they were analyzing the survey is that, hey, everybody walks, everybody needs safe places to walk. And
Yeah.
so I think it's always nice to find things that we all share, which is, need for sidewalks and pathways.
Yeah.
So, it's always great to see those reinforced.
Yeah. That's also what we found from the public engagement and the pop-up event is that walking is in abundance, but the problem is connections, sidewalk connection. It also goes with the infrastructure priorities people mentioned, which is sidewalk repair and installation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this project?
I just want to say, great job, Emmanuel and Apple, and Blake too. But I know Emmanuel and Apple are, still probably getting used to everything. And it's great to just see you all jump into some really great projects and come out with some really great data. So just want to say, great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was very informative. I learned a lot from all the NPO staff presentations. Thank you very much. They were great. If there is no other questions, we can move on to agenda item 7. That's the status report on TIP projects under design and construction. And Tim, you're going to take care of this?
Yes. Hello. Not a lot of things to report, but we do have a few. Project number 613-213, which is 41 bridges in the Route 3 corridor. That has gotten started. So basically it's 10% complete at this point. Then we have 610-719, Burlington to Tingsboro pavement preservation on Route 3. And that we've updated the TIP cost. It's increased by about $10 million. 610-704, Burlington Billerica resurfacing and related work on Route 3A. That is starting to wind up. We're up to 92% complete there with the expected completion date in November. 608-861, Westford Bridge rehabilitation, Stony Brook Road over Stony Brook. The add date has been changed to August of 2026 from April of 2026. 608-826, Tewksbury Andover Interstate resurfacing and related work on I-93. That project is, we've got duplicate a duplicate project listing because of the 2 MPOs that it spans. So this actually doesn't have anything going on in it in that project at the moment. And then 608-227, Billerica Yankee Doodle Bike Path. That has had the updated cost estimates with the tip cost going from 17 million up to 24 million, and some smaller increment changes to the total federal participating cost and the total contract cost. And the bid open date has been moved up to was moved up to August 9th. So that's already advertised. And that's it. That's all we have for today.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions regarding Mass DOT tip projects? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we can move on to action item 8, which is other business. I'll open up the floor if anybody has any other business.
The main thing to note is, as Emmanuel mentioned, we have this Chelmsford Center Village Public Workshop on Monday, October 6th. So if anybody wants to stop by, it's an open house style format. So you don't have to stay the entire hour and a half. You can come in and circulate and leave. And then our next MPO meeting is Wednesday, October 22 at 2:00 p.m. That's it from MPO staff.
Thank you. Any other business? Oh, great. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 9 is adjournment. Can I ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, actually, if I could quick add, you've all received invites to NMCOG's annual meeting, which is on October 15 at Chelmsford Center for the Arts. So we keep sending those out, but if you are able to join us, we'd love to have you. And with that, we've had 2 motions to adjourn. So I don't know if that's, no, we had Pat and Stephen.
Okay, can we take one as a second?
I'll second.
All right,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Have a good
Have a
one.
great
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bye.